welcome to The Disciplined Life. I'm Aria.
And I'm Coda.
We use our experience as a married couple living in a domestic discipline marriage to talk about the ups and downs of implementing authority structure and domestic discipline into modern relationships.
Let's do it. Welcome in.
This week we are going to be talking about a subject that I think is prevalent for the beginning of a new year. And do you want to tell them?
Goal setting, or do we dare use the New Year's resolution? I really don't like that. I like goal setting. So we're going to talk about goals for the new year.
And how it pertains to domestic discipline in particular.
Yes. So you want to start, or?
That is completely up to you.
Well, you jump in if there's.
Okay. Okay.
But Aria and I thought about this topic because we particularly are reestablishing some goals for our relationship in the new year. But why is it important, I think, is what we really want to talk about why it's important in the new year to set goals. Why is that even an important thing to do? Say it's a dream until you write it down. Once you write it down, then it's a goal. That you need sometimes yearly goals, sometimes you need monthly goals, sometimes you need weekly goals. And you need to be a goal setter. You can achieve what you're trying to achieve in life, or in this case in your relationship, if you don't have a goal in mind or goals in mind. You will just have ideas about where you want your relationship to go, but you'll never actually achieve them because you didn't actually sit down with your partner and say, here's where we want to go this year, and what are the things that we need to do in order to accomplish that?
I think that goal setting is really important to basically have a plan. And I feel like we try to do this every year, where we sit down, we make goals. We definitely did it last year. A lot of the things we implemented and the goals that we set last year didn't end up exactly working out the way we thought. But it's important to continue to try to refine your relationship with goals so that it can continue to move forward. The purpose behind goal setting is really to try to alleviate the stagnation of your relationship.
Which, gosh, that can happen very quickly if you're not careful, for sure.
So the way we set goals in our relationship is we usually sit down and we try to reflect on the previous year or previous years and try to say, okay, what worked really well? What is a system that we implemented that really worked well in our relationship this year? What is something that we set last year? What's a goal that we set last year that has made it to this point in this year? And then we say, okay, what didn't work well? Where are the points that need improvement? And what are some of the goals that we set last year that did not carry all the way through the year? And how can we redefine those goals, or how can we set new goals to help those points of growth that need to come?
As I thought you said it better than what I was going to say.
So last year we implemented the tier system into our discipline structure, and I believe that we have a old podcast talking all about our tier system and how
we do.
That is something that we set up last year. It was a goal of ours to be more consistent in discipline and in accountability, and that's the tier system is not something that has made it to this point in the year.
In my opinion, it was too difficult to remember what task fell under which tier. So I would try to remember if a task wasn't done. Okay, was that first tier? Was that second tier?
Well, and the problem is that we set it up to where in the obedience app that we've referenced in the past, we haven't referenced it recently, but we use the obedience app.
We still use it though.
We do. We set it up to where it would automatically tick into the tier, but the problem is that if a certain task fell into tier 1, for instance, but it wasn't done repeatedly, then it would move into tier 2, and then you would have to remember, okay, how many times has this been an issue? Is this something that needs to move into tier 2 or even tier 3? And then also we had a tier, and I'm going to forget which one because I've since deleted them because they weren't working for us. But we had a tier where it was like you basically got to choose whether or not the punishment was non-spanking or spanking.
Spanking, right.
And that was something that that was almost like a decision fatigue for you because you weren't sure how to handle it and what to do. And it was actually creating problems with having that consistent accountability. And that was what we were trying to achieve. We were trying to achieve more consistent accountability with the tier system, and so it wasn't working to meet its purpose.
And I think I've shared this on the podcast before, and Arya definitely knows this about me because she's been married to me a long time, is I'm a very simple guy. I don't like complicated stuff. If things are complicated, first of all, it doesn't make sense to me. I have a hard time thinking through things. I have a hard time working through things. We thought the tier system was actually going to be simple. It wasn't. It was too dang complicated. So the reason it didn't survive is because we took a hard look at it and went, this isn't working. We need something simpler. We need it to where I can absolutely know, not that thinking through things is bad, but that I can make decisions quickly on certain things rather than, well, what tier system does this fall under? What kind of violation was this? And just, it was way too complicated.
So that is definitely something that moving forward, we haven't really sat down and talked about our goals yet. We are going to have a concentrated time to be able to talk through everything. But I think moving forward, like, instead of having this tier system where, we have all of these options for punishments, and we have all these options for consequences, I think that what we're going to do is we're going to simplify down to really what works. If you're on our Patreon, you have access to see a written article that I made of all these different options for non-spanking punishments. And I think that we have found that a lot of those are just not things that work within our dynamic.
Right.
And so we are going to simplify down to, I think, about 3 options. And we'll talk more about that in a future podcast. But we're going to simplify the options on the table because a lot of, it's just finding what works and what works within your relationship, what works within your, just your ability to facilitate the punishments themselves, and what works for the individuals that are in the relationship, right?
And so as we said, the tier system may be something that you guys want to implement that you think will work for your relationship. For us, it just didn't work, and again, it's just because I'm a very simple person. Sometimes I've joked, but this may be the truth. I'm a simpleton, as they say, and I don't like complications. I like systems that work quickly and efficiently, and to me, less is always more. So. I guarantee you the goals that we're going to be setting for this new year are going to be goals that we feel like, first of all, that we can achieve. I think setting goals that you feel like you can achieve is important. Sometimes I, again, get too complicated and I go a little overboard. I don't set goals sometimes that I didn't truly look at and say, is this something I really can achieve this year? And it's okay to set longer goals that you think, oh, maybe I can do this in 5 years or 3 years. But if you're setting just yearly goals, really look at it and make sure, is this a goal that I can achieve this year? And so those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at. Are these goals that we can achieve this year? And how can we and are these goals that are simple to achieve? Are we complicating it too much? And so those are the things that I would say to take a look at, is really look at the goals and say, okay, are we complicating these goals? Are these too complicated, and are they achievable in a year? Or are these more long-term goals that we need to put 3 to 5 years out? Maybe, hopefully, I mean, 10 years would be fine, but that's a long time. So that's a lot of things that we're going to look at. And I think the other thing that I would say is don't put too many. I tended to be a goal setter. I'm like, I'm going to do these 25 things. And it's like, whoa, even 10 might be too much. I actually, this last year, just for me personally, I just did 5 goals. That I was like, I want to achieve these 5 things. And then I had more goals for a longer term. But for the year, I had these 5 things. So it may be more for our relationship, but me personally, that's what I did. And, I was able to accomplish 3 out of the 5, which was pretty good.
And I think that really when you're looking at your relationship, I think that a good way to approach goal setting is to think about, what do you want to accomplish within your relationship? What do you want to accomplish as a couple? And what are some personal goals that are still relationship focused for each person? So I know that when we come together, we're going to be able to have, like, I'll be able to bring Coda a list of things that I personally want to work on that he can help me with through accountability and checking in. He may even set some rules around those things to help me.
Maybe.
But he also can have goals for how he wants to approach his leadership, or how he wants to approach being the head of the household and being the authority over me. And so he can share those goals with me, or he can keep those goals to himself and just work on them. But it's important to realize, like, goals don't mean, like, having goals within the relationship doesn't necessarily mean that they are, like, centered on both people. They
Right.
can be goals for one or both of you.
That's
depending.
a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And you, again, you may have goals individually, and then goals for your relationship, and those are all important things. And I would say look at those goals every day. One of the things the reason I did only accomplish 3 out of the 5 goals that I set this last year is because what I was used to doing is having my goal sheet everywhere. So I'd have my goal sheet at work. I would have my goal sheet in a notebook that I would keep some thoughts and notes and things in. I would have it on my phone. I would have it everywhere, and maybe I can convince Aria to let me, keep one on the mirror, so when I'm getting ready in the morning, I see my goals. Because I used to do that way back when. But just have it there so you can always be reminded of what your goals are and why you're going for what it is that you're trying to achieve. And I think that's important, because if you can remind yourself daily, if not every time you see your goals, wherever you have it posted, it'll remind you why you're doing certain things, and it will help constantly remind you, this is why I'm doing this, or I need to focus on this. I haven't focused on this goal today, so I need to spend some time doing that.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that really you just have to sit down and decide what the priority is, and I think that it's important when you're talking within a domestic discipline context, let the head of the household kind of lead that conversation, and let the head of household set the pace of the conversation surrounding goals. As the submissive partner, I can bring my goals and my concerns, I can bring my thoughts and opinions to my head of household and say, these are the things that I've been thinking about, and then let him kind of drive that conversation and decide what the priorities are for the relationship and for you as a couple, and then let him set the goals that fit those priorities.
Yeah, well said. I think that's good. And because you don't want this to be head of households, I'm going to speak to you just for a moment. I think everything Aria just said is really, really good. You want to drive this because you are the head of household, and she is looking for you to drive it. She wants you to show the direction that you're wanting to go. But make sure that you're allowing her, though, to have some input. I think the tendency can be as, well, I've already set the goals, this is where we're going. No, let her have some input, because again, if she's not on board, it's going to be hard for you to lead. It's going to be hard for you to hold her accountable to the rules because you just decided them on your own. Make sure that this is, in fact, a collaborative effort. But yes, at the end of the day, you have the final say and you say, this is where we're going to go. But that conversation is important, and make sure that you allow her to have input.
I know for us that there are some things that I have in my goals and in my, sphere of concern that Coda may not even be aware of. He may not be aware that they're a struggle of mine. He may not be aware that they are things that I want to achieve. And so I need to be able to share those things with him and say, look, I have been trying. For instance, one of my goals that I'm going to be bringing to him is I really want to start implementing more routines into my day. Not just a checklist, not just a task list, but really building routines around things that need to be done. And he may not even be aware that in my mind, there's a distinction between a to-do list and a routine. And he may not be aware that I have been trying to implement routines and failing, and that he may not be aware that I need help in that area. And so if I don't bring that to him and share that concern of mine with him, he's not going to know to help me with that. And it may not be a priority of his, but his priority is to help me feel more accomplished, to help me feel more structured. And so one way he knows that he can do that is by offering me accountability and authority over making sure that I implement the routines.
Yes, exactly. And so, and so that's why it's so important. Sit down, talk about these things, and then really decide. And like I say, you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to have even a list of 10, but just try to decide how many goals you think you realistically can accomplish in 1 year. And it's okay, as we just talked about, that if some of the goals you decide, this isn't working and they fall by the wayside, that's okay. As we talked about, the tier system just didn't work for us. So, but you know what? Even though we dropped that, we still accomplished a lot in this last year that was very positive, that was very good for our relationship. And the point is to be better than you were the year before, and that your relationship is better than it was the year before. So you want to do everything that you can in that goal setting to move it forward. To not be, as she said at the very beginning, have your relationship stagnate. Because one of the things that they say in everything, I've heard it recently, that relationships end and everything, even after you can be together quite a while, is because there's a stagnation that happens, and both or one of the partners just gets comfortable with that stagnation and doesn't want to continue to grow. And that's why it's so important to set these goals and to remind each other that you're both going to work towards not letting the relationship stagnate, and you're going to work towards these goals. And I do use the word work. I know it's a 4-letter word, but it does take work and it does take effort. But if you're moving together, and as a head of household, if you're leading because you've already decided what the goals are and you know where you're headed, you can lead her better, and she sees that, she will be on board, and it'll be a better year. Even when you reach some obstacles, you'll be able to overcome those because you're on the same page with your goals.
And I think the only other thing that I really wanted to touch on is, just because you're a submissive partner doesn't mean that your goals and your needs don't get to be factored into the equation.
Exactly.
And just because you're the head of household doesn't mean that all of your desires, needs, and wants get to be the priority.
Oh, darn.
I think that it would be a
balance, right?
It needs to be a balance, and I think that one way that you could approach it, and I think that this might be a way that we approach it. I know you keep saying 10 might be too many goals. It might be a good idea for each partner to create a list of 5. So together bring 10 goals.
There you go.
And then from that list, decide what 3 or 5 goals are going to be the main priority.
Because maybe they're similar. Maybe that's because
Yeah,
take
you
them
may
from
have
that list.
shared goals on that list.
Right.
But then decide on 3 to 5 goals to focus on as the priority, and then check in once a month, once a quarter. And if you are finding, hey, we've been working on this goal and it's really solidified as a habit now, let's move another goal into that priority spot from our previous list. And so you can work through your goals too. Goal setting is not a once a year activity.
No, it's just, like I said, my father was always telling me to set goals even within the year.
Goals are fluid, right?
Yes.
So if you find, like, one of my goals is, like I mentioned, is to get into routine. So if I'm like, okay, let's start with a morning routine. Once that becomes a habit and is no longer a point that really requires a lot of focus and a lot of effort, then I can say, okay, what is the next area that I want to implement a routine?
Nightly routine.
Yes, but
I'm being facetious. Sorry.
but so you may take your master list of 10 goals, which may end up only being 7 or 8 if you have a few shared goals. You decide to prioritize 3, 4, or 5 goals, depending on what you think you can accomplish. And then throughout the year, check in and see, can we move another one of those goals into a priority spot because one of these other things has become habit.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, it'll differ for every couple. So don't think if you wind up having 10 or 15 goals that somehow that's bad. You just do what's right for you guys. And, I don't know how many Aria and I are going to come up with. I'm just saying for me, when I do my personal goals, I only allow myself to have about 5 or 6 because I know that's about all I can accomplish. And for me, less is more.
And in all fairness, the goals that you set for yourself are pretty...
High?
Yeah, you have a pretty high standard for yourself. And so the goals you set for yourself are difficult. They're difficult goals. And so you may have goals in your relationship where they're not as difficult. So you can handle more goal setting because you're like, maybe one of your goals is to eat out less. And that's a pretty small goal.
How did you know that was one of my goals?
Is it really?
It is.
And that's a pretty small goal. That's not something that requires a huge, it requires effort. All goals do. But it's not something that requires a lot of mental and emotional effort. And that might be something that you can tack on to a larger list. So what are some of your other goals?
You want to know some of my
Yeah,
personal
I
goals?
do.
So one of my goals as the head of household is to be a better leader. I don't feel like I've been a good leader. And so, yeah, I just want to be a better leader to my wife and to my family this year. So,
Goal setting is just one of those things that we all make goals or resolutions, whatever you want to call it this time of year, and we do it with the best intentions. But unless you are intentional about your goal setting, typically those goals end up being pretty unachievable. And when the rubber meets the road, it can be really easy to give up on your goals. And so we just want to encourage you to be intentional, to be realistic, to be practical, and to work together as a couple to set goals to better your relationship, to embrace your role within your relationship, whether that is the head of household, whether that's the submissive partner. Embrace your role, grow in that role, and set goals to support the outcomes you want. Set goals to support the outcomes that you want.
well said. Well said. So happy goal setting. And remember, it's a dream until you write it down. Then it's a goal.
All right, guys, we'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye.